Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this is your Red Pill News. Hope everyone's having a lovely day. We had an incredible weekend here on the program. Ben and Rob from Edge of Wonder were on Friday. Then we had Sam Tripoli and John Paul Rice from the Tinfoil Hat podcast, which has been undeleted. Thank you, Jesus. Good stuff happening to good people. And then we've got all kinds of news to go over today. There's been some posts from our favorite Anon over the weekend and actually just in the lead up to recording this program. And that news that we've got to go over has to do with the FBI lawyer who altered the FISA docs. That is huge news. President Trump has announced that the Navy secretary who was blackmailing him, as reported by the New York Times, has been replaced. Rudy Giuliani drops an even bigger Moab on the Biden family. This time it's about Iraq. Also, Senators Grassley and Johnson are seeking suspicious activity reports on Hunter Biden. That does not look good. Adam Schiff is squirming in his seat when asked about being a witness in this impeachment trial, which is sure to take place in the Senate. Brian Stelter calls President Trump a cult leader using mind control. That's very ironic coming from Brian in the mainstream media. And finally, a juror from the Roger Stone trial has come out and outed himself as a hardcore leftist. I said before, I wasn't certain about Roger Stone. Doesn't mean that I have to be right. I could be totally wrong. But I did say that there was a reason Roger Stone was going to be put on trial. And this right here, exposing the corruption in the American judicial system, this could be it. All right, guys, I want you to sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor. One of the best things you can do to help protect your personal phone and internet data is to sign up for a free 30-day trial of Virtual Shield VPN mobile and desktop app. This will allow you to create a secure connection to another network over the internet. Virtual Shield can be used to shield your browsing activity from prying eyes, whether on a public Wi-Fi connection, foreign country, or just at home. Here, let me show you how easy it is. I'm going to go to virtualshield.com or the App Store and download the free Virtual Shield 30-day trial. Install it and click Connect, and there you go. Once I'm connected, my IP address is now different than before. Virtual Shield is offering a Black Friday month-long special of 40% off all VPN plans and all premium add-ons, including Protection Plus, Residential Access, and VIP performance plans for as low as a cup of coffee. Sign up for a free 30-day trial to Virtual Shield VPN and see what the hype is about. You've got nothing to lose. All right, first off today, guys, I wanted to go over this post from Thursday because I think it's so important and it really does highlight some of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. So our favorite Anon is posted here at 3613. The title on QMAP is What Happens When 90% of the Media is Controlled and Owned by 6 Corporations? And it starts off like that. What happens when 90% of the media is controlled and owned by 6 corporations? What happens when those same corporations are operated and controlled by a political ideology? What happens when the news is no longer free from bias? What happens when the news is no longer reliable and independent? What happens when the news is no longer trustworthy? What happens when the news simply becomes an extension arm of a political party? Fact becomes fiction? Fiction becomes fact? When does news become propaganda? Identity creation? How does the average person who is under constant financial stress by design find time to research and discern fact from fiction? Majority of people more prone to believe someone in power sitting behind a big brand news name? Do people, human psyche, tend to follow the majority mainstream viewpoint in fear of being isolated and or shunned? Mainstream media is used for a reason: dominate, trend, in opinion. If majority of people believe X, then X must be validated true. Why do mainstream media heads within different organizations always use the same words and or catchphrases? Coordinated? By who? Outside entity providing instructions? Do they count on the fact that people, human psyche, are more prone to believe something if heard over and over again by different trusted sources? Do echo chamber topics provide validation or credibility to the topic point being discussed? Threat to intellectual freedom? Would control over of these institutions and organizations allow for the mass control of a population's viewpoint regarding a desired topic? Read again, digest. Would control over of these institutions and organizations allow for the mass control of a population's viewpoint regarding a desired topic. Logical thinking. Why, after the election of 2016, did D's and Media Corps jumpstart a coordinated and planned divisive blitz intended to create falsehoods regarding illegitimacy of election, character assassination of POTUS through sexism, racism, every other ism? Pre- and post-2016 election? Why were violent masked terror orgs such as Antifa immediately created and funded? Why were these orgs tasked with immediate intimidation shutdown of any pro-POTUS rally and or events? Why were marches immediately organized to counter and silence pro-POTUS rallies and or events? Why were marches immediately organized which divided people into sex, gender, race, ism? When you control the levers of news dissemination, you control the narrative. Control of the narrative equals power. When you are blind, what do you see? They want you divided. Divided by religion, divided by sex, divided by political affiliation, divided by class. When you are divided and angry and controlled, you target those different from you, not those responsible, your controllers. Divided, you are weak. Divided, you pose no threat to their control. When non-dogmatic information becomes free and transparent, it becomes a threat to those who attempt to control the narrative and or stable, livestock kept, sheep. When you are awake, you stand on the outside of the stable, groupthink collective, and have free thought. Free thought is a philosophical viewpoint which holds that positions regarding truth should be formed on the basis of logic, reason, and empiricism, rather than authority, tradition, revelation, or dogma. All right, guys. So I think that what our favorite Anon is pointing out is quite clear. The controllers are those who are running the media, who are working with the Democratic Party, and who are the organizations that set up and control the counter demonstrations to the pro-POTUS information and marches that we see and that we participate in. Who is that controller? Well, one of them is certainly George Soros. I would say that the others would probably be the Democratic Party, people like Hillary and Bill Clinton, also the banking elite families who control all of the central banks throughout the world. And the reason that I do this is because I saw this happening. I was inspired by our favorite Anon. I was inspired by President Trump when I saw that the media and everyone who was in control universally hated him and had to have him removed. They had to do everything they could to brainwash the masses and to get them to think that there was something wrong with President Trump, that what he was doing was bad, that his agenda to make America great again was somehow evil. Well, it's not. It's clearly not. Everything that he's done has been good for America. And I do this work specifically because I believe in the mission of the president, I believe in the restoration of America, and I believe in the dissemination of truth. Now, another thing that's very important here, the information about being divided. The whole left-right paradigm, the whole us and them, the whole good and bad, that's not how the world works. These are shades of gray that we're dealing with. Now, we have people certainly who are working towards the best ends possible, but we have people who may just not be smart enough to realize that they've been lied to. We have people who have been brainwashed. And this is one of the reasons that I always stress, don't get into it with people on social media. Do not go attacking other people because they don't believe what you believe. There are so many people who have the exact same mission and desire to spread the truth as me. Doesn't mean that we always believe in the exact same stuff, but I think that everyone needs to use their own discernment to decide what resonates with me. What do I feel is true? I think that when it comes down to it, we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And what's most important is for us to stand together as Americans and work towards the same goal. I do not like it when I go on social media, when I go on Twitter and I see people attacking each other, when I see people going after each other because they think they're weak or they're different. People in America have the right to be different. That is what is so great about this country. We have the freedom and the right to be exactly who we want to be in America without infringing upon the rights of our fellow men and women here as citizens. As long as we don't infringe upon the rights of others, whatever we choose to do, well, I think that that is something that's between us and God. But I know what that means for me, and I believe that most of my viewers know what that means for them. But sometimes I think it's good for us to remind ourselves of why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing. Now, on the idea of mass control, let's go ahead and take a look at that article about Brian Stelter. Well, here it is. CNN's Brian Stelter hosts a segment branding President Trump a destructive cult leader who is using mind control. Talk about projection, pot calling the kettle black. CNN's Brian Stelter ended his Sunday show with a segment claiming that President Trump is a destructive cult leader who is using mind control. Stelter began the segment by claiming that the word cult has been popping up more and more, using Anthony Scaramucci, who has been acting like a jilted lover, as an example. Stelter's guest was Stephen Hassan, author of The Cult of Trump, who was a member of the Unification Church cult of the 1970s, Newsbusters noted in their report. The bizarre author claimed that President Trump is a destructive cult leader, not a healthy cult leader. Okay. First of all, right there is no such thing as a healthy cult. Let's go ahead and take a look at this clip from the Brian Stelter program.
The word cult has been popping up more and more. Think back to 2 weeks ago on this program, Anthony Scaramucci talked about his claim that Trump supporters are in a cult. Just last week, Dan Rather said he thinks support for Trump seems increasingly cultish. And this weekend in the Washington Post, Trump critic and Republican strategist John Weaver said the GOP is not a party anymore in the traditional sense, it's a cult. But none of them are mental health experts. Stephen Hassan is. He's out with a brand new book called The Cult of Trump. He has firsthand experience escaping the Unification Church back in the 70s, and he's decided to write this book because he believes there's something seriously wrong with our politics.
So I define a destructive cult as an authoritarian, pyramid-structured group with someone at the top who claims to have total power and total wisdom that uses deception and control of behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions to make people loyal and dependent and obedient followers. So for me, the issue of between an ethical, healthy cult where you're free to think and free to leave versus a destructive cult, I'm referring to Trump's organization and followership as a destructive cult where people are being fed propaganda and they're not being encouraged to think for themselves. They're not being encouraged to really explore and look at the details and arrive at their own conclusion.
I'm going to stop him right there because that is absolutely false. We are not fed propaganda. We are fed the truth, which is counter-propaganda. President Trump does not tell us what to think. President Trump has woken up so many people from their slumber, allowed them to start thinking for themselves and to break out of the programming of the unhealthy cult of the mainstream media. Now, Stelter replied, "You say the president is using mind control, but how is that provable?" He says, so we can start with the pathological lying, false, which is characteristic of destructive cult leaders, saying things in a very confident way that have nothing to do with facts or truthfulness, the blaming others and never taking responsibility for his own failures and faults, shunning and kicking out anyone who raises questions or concerns about his own behavior. His use of fear-mongering, intimidation is a horrible thing, Hassan responded. Once again, everything that he is listing here is something that we can point to in the Democratic Party and in the complicit mainstream media. This network, which wants you to believe that they are neutral and unbiased, continued on to hold a serious discussion about how to make people stop supporting the president, while disparaging them as crazed cult members. Sounds like they're going to get real far. It is frightening to hear a cult expert say that you see all of these signs right now today in American politics, Stelter said. So finally, the first step, if you say this is a cult, what's the first step of deprogramming? The duo decided that their viewers should ruin Thanksgiving by being crappy to their pro-Trump relatives. The first step with anyone who's a true believer is contact with people that are outside the bubble. Cult leaders want to isolate their people. They want family and friends to just disappear rather than keep engaged. Hey, did you read this article? What do you think of it? You know, I'll watch one of your shows. Watch one of my shows. In other words, appealing to the person's true self, their authentic self, that wants to be a good person, that believes in America and democracy and truth. If you want the best for America and you believe in democracy and truth, then you should be able to stop demonizing people who think differently than you. President Trump and his followers are not anywhere near a cult. However, there is actual cult practices being used in such places as the mainstream media. He says, for the people who are dreading Thanksgiving, you're saying it's an opportunity to get together, Stelter said. Exactly. We're family, we're friends, let's talk. And truth will out. Truth will stand up to scrutiny. Amen to that. Truth will out, and it certainly will stand up to scrutiny once we start to see the exposure of the crimes committed by people in the mainstream media and the Democratic Party. I think that all of us watching here, there's not a single one of us who has ever felt like we were told to do anything other than to think for ourselves and to examine the evidence, and certainly not when it comes to our favorite Anon. Right here, we have an example of buzzwords, keywords being used by the mainstream media starting to pop up. Well, everything else didn't work, so now we're just going to call President Trump and his followers a cult. Now, post 3617, it says FBI under investigation for altering 302's official interview records. This is a proof. We were told this some time ago. It's a tweet from Kim Sachs 1. We'll take a look at that in a second, but we're told news unlocks. You have more than you know. Let's look at her tweet. And Kim says, FBI 302's modified. We knew this a long time ago. Yes, we did. Going all the way back, we've got a post here from April of 2019. We've got another post from June of 2018. And there it is, 302's modified. So this is not a surprise for us Anons because we knew it was happening. Future proves past. Now, let's take a look at some reporting. And here it is from the Gateway Pundit. FBI lawyer who altered FISA docs and his lover worked for current ICIG who edited the IC whistleblower form to legitimize Schiff sham. Obama corrupted everything he could touch over his 8 years as president. His military was prosecuting its own soldiers for murdering enemy combatants. Obama's State Department was a pay-for-play racketeering enterprise, and Obama's FBI and DOJ morphed into sick and criminal gangs. What a mess. Over the weekend, we learned from another leak to the Washington Post that an individual in Obama's FBI altered documents that provided support for a FISA warrant obtained to spy on a candidate and President Trump. The individual or individuals was soon identified as Kevin Kleinsmith, who worked with his reported lover Sally Moyer for the current intelligence community Inspector General Michael Atkinson. Very strange. The same man who altered the form used by the current whistleblower so that they could try to take down the president. Now, Conservative Treehouse reported, if you have followed the case closely, the intentional removal of Peter Strzok in combination with the explanation of the lawyer's FISA responsibilities, and in combination with prior reporting of FBI lawyer 2, it seems pretty obvious the line-level lawyer was Kevin Kleinsmith. If the WAPO article had added all the detail and left in how the line-level attorney worked for Peter Strzok, everyone would have known who it was. Hence, they put in more details about his activity, but removed the Strzok reference. Kevin Kleinsmith was one of the key FBI small group members on the original Clinton investigation known as the mid-year exam, or in text messages as the MYE. Within the MYE, Kleinsmith was one of the key legal staff working with Peter Strzok. Kleinsmith was lawyer number 2 for Strzok, who eventually transferred to the subsequent Crossfire Hurricane investigation. Kleinsmith was also previously reported to be having an intimate relationship with another member of the FBI team, Sally Moyer, though that is uncertain. Tashina Tashgar was also a key legal figure on the main justice side of the MYE team. Sally Moyer was FBI unit chief in the Office of General Counsel, counterintelligence legal unit within the FBI Office of General Counsel. Ms. Moyer was responsible for the legal compliance within the FBI counterintelligence operations that generated FISA applications. When the MYE investigation finished, the Carter Page FISA construction is where Kevin Kleinsmith and Sally Moyer come together in their next assignment, the FBI investigation of Trump. The interesting connection is that Kleinsmith and Moyer both also reportedly worked for Michael Atkinson while he was an attorney within the Department of Justice. Atkinson next took a position as the ICIG. Recently, it was reported that Atkinson changed the IC whistleblower form in September, shortly after a Clowns in America agent who was spying in the Trump White House drafted a complaint on President Trump. Atkinson saw to it that the whistleblower form was updated to allow for secondhand information, which the whistleblower provided in his complaint. Although the form should not have been accepted based on secondhand information and because it was about the President of the United States, who is not in the intelligence community, Atkinson accepted the complaint. The whistleblower later attempted to edit the form he originally provided, and the original form stated that the whistleblower did not talk to Congress before filling in the form, but after it was discovered he had met with Adam Schiff's team in Congress, the whistleblower attempted to edit his form. The fact that the whistleblower worked as a Clowns in America operative also causes concerns, since the clowns are only supposed to work overseas while working on external threats. He is not supposed to be spying in the White House on the president. This bummer group of criminals should all be in jail, not running around attempting another coup on the President of the United States. Hashtag lock them all up. So here we have a nice cozy little picture of Sally Moyer, Kevin Kleinsmith, and current ICIG Michael Atkinson. So one of the things that we learned very recently, Nate Kane did an excellent interview with Frank from Quite Frankly and Tracy Beans from The Tracy Beans Show, Frank and Beans, and he revealed for the first time that one of the people who was involved in his complaint was Michael Atkinson. Now, we also had a theory about why nothing was done before. There was some definite hanky-panky taking place in the FBI and the DOJ. We know from Nate's interview, and by the way, he will be doing an interview here on this program on December 13th, Friday the 13th. We know from that interview that the information he provided should have gone directly to Devin Nunes and his staff. Now, shortly after that information was provided, there was a changeover. There was the election in 2018, and then shortly after that, everything changed, and they came after Nate. Now, our favorite Anon here stated that the information that they took from Nate's house was in order to protect him, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't still things taking place within the FBI and the DOJ to stonewall the investigation. Well, Devin Nunes revealed something very interesting on his podcast, and Nate put it out in a tweet. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so in the tweet here, Nate says, huge, very important. What happened to the Devin Nunes and Trey Gowdy investigations into the FBI? Pay close attention, starting at 7:39. The FBI were trying to set up members of Congress who were investigating them. Obstruction, entrapment. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
Obstruct our investigation. And of course, we've made criminal referrals on that matter. But more so than that, they were willing to get anybody in their obstruction of justice trap. I mean, there were numerous times that Trey Gowdy and I would talk about how they were, I mean, we almost laughed at them because they were so clumsy, because we would bust them for not giving us information, and then they would like leak something out. And, it was obvious. I mean, there was one time that they went out and they tried to have us come over on a Friday morning, demanded that we come over to look at some documents. And Gowdy and I were like, what, you think we're stupid? And then by that evening, they had leaked out those documents into the press. I mean, this is DOJ and the FBI. I'm not even talking about the Democrats in the House. They didn't have this. This was the FBI and DOJ and the Mueller team leaking this out on us, trying to trap us in obstruction of justice and leaking information.
The DOJ, the FBI, and the American press.
And that says it right there. The DOJ, the FBI, and the American press. The DOJ and the FBI were trying to set up Devin Nunes and Trey Gowdy into an obstruction trap by leaking documents, and then they were going to blame it on them. Perhaps this is why nothing happened in terms of the investigation with the information that Nate brought forward. Very, very compelling. All right, now, over the weekend, it was reported in the New York Times that Navy Secretary Richard Spencer was blackmailing President Trump over the case regarding Eddie Gallagher. But now his replacement has been announced by the Pentagon because they forced his resignation over this case. And this happened on Sunday. They announced that it terminated Richard Spencer as Secretary of the Navy over the handling of Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher's war crime case. Defense Secretary Mark Esper asked for his resignation on Sunday, and this was over Spencer's mishandling and continued threats to Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher. Gallagher, of course, has served 19 years in the U.S. Navy. He's done 8 tours, 6 of which was as an elite Special Forces operator. He was ranked as the top SEAL chief, and his platoon ranked as the top SEAL platoon. Absolutely incredible to think that the Secretary of the Navy, Richard Spencer, could blackmail the president into doing what he wanted to do. It's called the chain of command. The president is the commander-in-chief, and you bow to his leadership. So I am extremely happy to see that Spencer is out. Now, Rudy Giuliani has dropped another one on the Biden family, and he's adding Iraq to the ever-expanding list of corrupt dealings that this family was involved in. Rudy Giuliani is on fire and put the D.C. swamp and the liberal media stenographers on notice on Saturday. Giuliani reminded the D.C. swamp that he previously cleaned up mafia in New York and asked them, "Do you honestly think I'm intimidated?" Giuliani presented a letter to Senate Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham with evidence of a Democrat criminal conspiracy with Ukrainians to prevent Donald Trump from being president. Giuliani previously released information on the Biden family and their questionable dealings in Ukraine, China, and Romania. And in 2016, the final year of the Obama administration, Hunter Biden traveled to Romania to meet with a shady real estate tycoon who was accused of orchestrating a corrupt land deal. While that Romanian businessman was Gabriel Popaviciu, a wealthy real estate tycoon, and Hunter Biden was brought in to be his lawyer, according to a new report by NBC. Here is Rudy's letter to Senate Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham, where he also mentions Iraq as yet another country of shady Biden family dealings. Just when you think the communist left thinks they have cornered Rudy, he comes back swinging. If you want the complete picture on Rudy Giuliani's recent actions, take the time to read his letter to Lindsey Graham. Now, we are running low on time, so I'm not going to read through this entire letter for you today, guys, but I am going to be leaving it in the pinned comment below. Rudy Giuliani is one of the amazing American heroes of our time. Don't expect him to allow these horrid leftists to take him out with their lies. Now, even more bad news for the Bidens. GOP Senators Grassley and Johnson are seeking suspicious activity reports on Hunter Biden for possible money laundering and fraud related to Burisma. Two powerful GOP Senate chairmen are seeking suspicious activity reports on Hunter Biden and Burisma Holdings, a Ukrainian natural gas company. Grassley and Johnson sent a letter to the Treasury Department asking for documents for possible money laundering and fraud related to Hunter Biden and Burisma. The senators are seeking suspicious activity reports or documents that financial institutions file with the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network when a case of money laundering or fraud is suspected. In the letter, which was dated November 15th, the senators said Senate Finance Committee and Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee are both conducting an investigation into potentially improper actions taken by Barry's administration with respect to Burisma and Ukraine. While then Vice President Biden was in office, his son Hunter worked for Burisma and would be paid as much as $50,000 a month. At the time, Burisma and its owner were under investigation by Ukraine and the UK authorities. The senators went on to point out that Biden threatened to withhold the aid from Ukraine unless Viktor Shokin was fired, and the letter referenced that John Solomon's explosive investigative reporting, adding, in addition, Burisma's consulting firm Blue Star Strategies used Hunter Biden's board membership to gain access to Obama admin officials at the State Department and potentially influence matters before government officials on behalf of Burisma. The story is getting worse and worse by the day for Hunter and Archer. Both Hunters, if you think about it, which was pointed out in a post from our favorite Anon. So it's quite clear to me that the Obama administration was covering up for the Bidens and allowing them to do a lot of illegal things. And now, if they go back and find the records of them covering this up, there's a good chance this will bring it all home and allow them to be finally held accountable for the laws they've broken. All right, Adam Schiff is speaking out about being a witness. He does not like the idea. Adam Schiff went on Meet the Press on Sunday morning to discuss his failed week of sham impeachment hearings, and Chuck Todd said, "You should be a witness. They may want to call you." Adam Schiff says, "Well, look, if the Senate wants to call me as a witness, then they pretty much made the decision not to take this process seriously. I'm not a fact witness. I was the chairman of one of the committees doing the investigation. I'm not in the shoes of a special counsel. I don't work in the Justice Department. All I can relate is what the witnesses said in the deposition and in the open hearings, and there's no reason to call me as a witness." Well, of course, Schiff left out the fact that he lied about meeting with the anti-Trump whistleblower, and I personally think that that's something that is very relevant to this case, and Devin is definitely going to want to ask Schiff about that. I think there's a lot of reasons why Schiff doesn't want to be called a witness, and probably it has to do with the fact that he's a liar. All right, and finally, a Roger Stone juror has outed himself as a hardcore leftist after the trial and before sentencing, which proves there was a poisoned jury pool. The left-wing juror gave large amounts to Beto O'Rourke and Jill Stein, spent years working under liberal donor Bill Gates at Microsoft. His name is Seth Cousins. He's juror number 3 in Roger Stone's recent trial, and he just couldn't resist the limelight. In an op-ed published by the Washington Post, Cousins claimed that the jury, who handed down a guilty verdict on all counts against Stone, acted independently and with no bias towards Mr. Stone for his previous political activities or the fact that he is one of President Trump's most ardent defenders and longtime friends. Reading Mr. Cousins' op-ed is like reading a summation of the trial as if it were prepared by the left-wing team of prosecutors. The op-ed drips with self-righteous indignation against Roger Stone and accepts the premise of every allegation made by the federal prosecutors as if those allegations were as legitimate and solid as the Ten Commandments. Before we review who Seth Cousins is and what likely formed his predetermined stance on Roger Stone and the allegations made against him by politically motivated prosecutors, we should address some of the dubious claims Mr. Cousins made in his op-ed published by the Washington Post. After that, we can delve into the ethical and moral violations of profiteering from your jury service. Now, claim number 1, our jury was diverse in age, gender, race, ethnicity, income, education, and occupation. And it says at first glance that may seem like a fair statement, but why didn't Mr. Cousins also add in that the jury was diverse in political beliefs and voting patterns as well? He didn't mention that because it would not be true. Number 2, the evidence in this case was substantial and almost entirely uncontested. Stone's testimony before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence in September 2017 was a matter of record. Both the prosecution and defense agreed on these facts. The real dispute was whether Stone had lied under oath and whether that mattered. The defense offered by Stone's attorney can be summed up in 2 words: so what? Our unanimous conclusion was this: the truth matters. Well, it says the evidence in this case was neither substantial and was certainly not uncontested. The government made so many inferences about so many things, and Stone called Trump, and therefore they must have talked about this. Someone called someone days after something, and therefore this proves that they talked about something. Well, no, Mr. Cousins, the prosecution and defense did not agree on the facts. Also, claim number 3, we came close to rejecting one charge that we believed was written ambiguously. Our question was whether Stone had actually made a particular statement. In the end, we were convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Stone had in fact made that statement. While they briefly thought about not giving Roger Stone what amounts to spending his final years in jail for an hour or so, Mr. Cousins wants you to believe that because the jury deliberated over one of the 7 counts against Mr. Stone for a short period of time, that it must demonstrate that they were fair. Does he really believe people are this stupid? Claim number 4, after the trial was over, Judge Amy Berman Jackson came to the jury room to thank us for our service. This was the only time any of us had any contact with her outside of the program. Why would Cousins feel the need to explain that? He and the jury only came in contact with the judge once during the course of the trial, after the decision was rendered. Well, nobody has alleged any wrongdoing on behalf of Judge Amy Berman Jackson during the trial. Nobody has alleged that the jury had any improper contact with Judge Amy Berman Jackson. The need to say that seems odd, to say the least. Now, when I made comments about Roger Stone previously, I said I wasn't sure about him. But what I really meant and what I tried to say was that if Roger Stone broke the law, then he needs to pay for it. In the same way that everyone else in this country, especially the people on the left, need to pay if they've broken the law. This right here is reason enough to think that he did not receive a fair trial. I certainly think that the sentence that he was handed down was in no way fair. So I really think that the court needs to take a look at this. I really hope that Roger Stone is going to continue to appeal this decision. I hope that actual justice will be handed down and that Roger Stone will not spend the rest of his life in jail, because I do not believe that he deserves that. All right, guys, that is all the time we have for today. I want to thank everyone for joining me. As always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this was your Red Pill News. Good luck, everyone, and God bless. Hey guys, it's Red Pill. I just wanted to say one more thing. Thank you very much to all my patrons. Thank you to everyone who supports this channel. If anyone wants to help out, there are links in the description of this video below. Please make sure to subscribe to my backup channels in case anything happens here. I will begin publishing there. And if you guys have any questions or tips for me, please send me an email at redpill78@protonmail.com. Also, don't forget to make sure that you have notifications turned on for this channel. When you go to my channel page, there is a little bell. Click that bell and choose all notifications. And if you don't have one already, go sign up on Twitter and follow me there and make sure that your notifications are on. Because even if you don't get a notification from YouTube, I always have a notification that goes out on my Twitter page that lets you know every time I put out a new video. I look forward to reading your messages, I look forward to getting the news to you on a daily basis, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the next episode.